therefore I have to put is that this amendment be agreed to.
My Lords, I rise to offer the strongest possible Green Party support to the Noble Lord Lord Reynard's amendment to this motion. This is indeed a great cause for regret, although I will follow the Noble Lord in saying that I entirely accept and agree with the security clarification. That's clearly necessary, unfortunately, and have absolutely no problems with that. But I think it's really telling that on social media you kind of know that you're catching the zeitgeist and people are recognising what you're saying when it gets repeated back to you. And I've got a couple of phrases that I use often on social media that are increasingly repeated back to me. One is #democracy. It would be a good idea. And the other is we get the politics that the few pay for. And the second is simply and undoubtedly a statement of fact. The Noble Lord Lord Reynard set out some of the figures of £10 million, but even a donation of £1 million, or in the context of the elections we're talking about £100,000, are potentially election changing. And as the Noble Lord said, this is happening at the absolute last minute. The only way this money is going to come in is through a few rich people. And we have to ask the question, and I'd love the Noble Lady the Minister to answer this, why does she think people give a donation of 10 million or 1 million or 100,000? Surely they don't give it for nothing. What do they get in return? Now, I feel like I should perhaps make a declaration of non-interest here, because as far as Green Party election spending, this is all entirely irrelevant. We were never going to spend up to the old limits, so this doesn't really matter to us at all, except the fact, of course, that we will face a deluge of paper, a deluge of social media posts, which will attempt to flood out our modest attempts to reach and speak to the electorate. That's the practical reality. Now, the Noble Lady, Baroness Vere, likes to ask, but where are people going to say the money come from? Well, I very much accept that figure from 2011 of a maximum donation of £10,000. I could set it lower, but that'll do for starters. I'm going to say what's often considered the unsayable. We need state funding of political parties and election campaigning. Instead of the few paying for the politics we get, that means we get the politics that everyone has chosen to get. And that effectively is how the Green Party fund things, how we're funding these elections, how we're going to fund the general election that's coming, which is by crowdfunding. People putting in their £10, their £20, they're making the choice to support a local candidate. But of course we've got a cost of living crisis. So the people who would put in £20 perhaps can only put in £10 now, or £5. But of course the millionaires, the billionaires are getting richer, so their donations just keep getting bigger and bigger. Now, I've got one final point to make, and it was the security element of this that really made me think of things that can stop candidates running that can get in the way, and that is something which I think deserves to be raised in this context and every electoral context, which is the access to elected office fund for disabled people, which was closed in March 2020 because of the COVID pandemic. We can discuss the continuation of the COVID pandemic, but I don't think we're in an emergency situation anymore now. We have failed to the government has failed to reinstate this, despite its inclusion in the Disability Action Plan. There was an open letter written to the government in November by a whole coalition of disability groups calling for this small, modest measure, find a little bit of money to enable disabled people to compete on a level playing field in elections. So my question to the Noble Lady the Minister is the government going to reinstate the access to elected office fund? It probably is too late for these elections. It's not too late for billionaires, but it's probably too late for disabled people to start to run. But we could at least do it for the next set of elections, for the general election.